basically it's not really fun, the FINMA guidelines, so I will try to make as fun as we can. So basically, I've just been informed that my presentation is a bit too long, so I try to shorten it a little bit, okay? So for the presentation, if I can, okay, here it is. So a brief now overview of what we're going to speak tonight. It's first we're going to have a little bit of background on why the FINMA has issued these guidelines. And also then we're going to focus on the main highlights of the FINMA ICOs guidelines, which is the non-action letter. And the biggest highlight of these guidelines is the classification of tokens. So it's the first time that a global regulator is presenting categories of tokens and saying how they're going to analyze the treatment of those categories of tokens. Then there is also the token development stages. The FINMA distinguished two different stages. We're going to talk about that just in a few seconds. And then, of course, what is the most interesting part, I guess, for you is how the FINMA going to apply the regulatory framework to those tokens. And basically, I can stop my presentation here because all I will say to you can be summarized into one single chart that we have been working with Alexander, my colleague, and we will show you to you afterwards, and Alexander will present it to you. But it can be summarized in one chart. But I guess a little bit of introduction would be of any help, right? Okay, so background. On September 29th of last year, FINMA has issued some guidance because at that time there was a lot of ICOs with one-page white paper, a lot of scams, and they were afraid that the investor would be subject to fraudulent behavior. So they issued this guidance by saying, okay, we recognize the innovative potential of distributed ledger technology. We have a neutral approach on it, but please be careful. There are areas of laws. Hey, that applies to the ICO of launching of ICOs. So you need, please, to make rulings with the FINMA before launching the ICOs, and you guys, all the investors around, need to be aware of fraudulent behavior. So that was the first step of the guidance. But now, today, we have a clear guidelines, which is a very big, and I want to stress that out, it's a big step forward to clarify the legal framework for ICOs in Switzerland. It's the first time that a global regulator provides a detailed analysis on how he's going to treat the ICO launching. And basically, it even gives a list of information required by the FINMA in order to have a non-action letter confirmation. So this is really quite new. And of course, the classification of token, we will look at it afterwards. But there is also a mention that the FINMA indicated that for each case, they're going to have a holistic approach, meaning that they're going to look for all the elements and the characteristic of the ICO to assess whether it fits to one regulation or to the other. So, first highlights. No action letter. As I said, it's on a case-by-case basis, the analysis, but also the FINMA is going to look on the underlying purpose, economic purpose of the ICO. That means that artificial structures or disclaimer that does not reflect the actual economic expectation of the investors are basically worthless. So we know that there's a lot of ICO that are established by foundations. So I'm not saying that foundations is not the right structure to do a foundation, but typically for a utility token where you can buy goods or services, it's hard to argue that it's for a public utility purpose. So you just need to be clear that what's going to be launched need to reflect the economic purpose of it. Now, as I said, the good practice is to present the project upfront to the FINMA to receive a non-action letter. That's what we advise to all our clients. And otherwise, it's risky because usually the token does not fall strictly in one of the category. We will see this afterwards. And again, as I explained, there is this list of questions. So it's really a list of questions. You can answer to each of the single question and then send it to the FINMA. And basically, you're quite safe. And the thing is, it's prevent all kind of question you might have upfront to the FINMA back and forth. So it saves a lot of time. So this is a big new novelty. Now, classification of tokens. I think every one of you has read these guidelines, or maybe not. But so there is 3 categories. The first one, the payment tokens. So here is the definition of the payment tokens. So they are tokens which are intended to be used now or in the future as a mean of payment for acquiring goods or services, or as a mean of money or value transfer. So it's cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Zcash, Dash, Monero, Litecoin, all these kind of cryptocurrencies. But the cryptocurrency does not give a right to claim against the issuer. That's important to understand. Now the utility token. Token which are intended to provide access digitally to an application or a service by means of blockchain infrastructure. That's for the utility token. We will go in further detail when we will talk about the regulatory framework. And the asset tokens, we discussed about this, I think Vincent was quite clear. So they are the one defined as a security, the one who can promise a share in future company earnings or future capital flows. So in terms of economic function, they are similar to bonds, equities, or derivatives. And it's also concerned tokens which is enable physical assets to be traded on the blockchain. So now, this individual classification is not mutually exclusive. That means that an asset token can be also a mean of payment, or a utility token can be also a mean of payment. And the FINMA referred to this as a hybrid token, as a hybrid form of a token. We will go also in details on that. And the stage I was talking about before, so the FINMA make a distinction between the pre-financing and the pre-sale phase. Pre-financing is when the investor just had a prospect of receiving at a certain point in the future a token, but the token or the underlying blockchain is not yet developed. So at this stage, the investor does not have any tradable asset on the blockchain. Pre-sale, in this case, the investor receives actually a token, which entitles him then to receive further other different token at a later date. So now, what is the application of the legal framework to those classification of tokens? Payment tokens, securities regulation. So according to the FINMA guidelines, a payment token is not treated as a security. And this is really a clear position of the FINMA, which is totally different with all the global regulator around the world. But here in Switzerland, we say, hey guys, payment token, not a security. No prospectus requirement, but of course the FINMA say a caveat, if case law or legislation will qualify payment token as a security, we reserve our right to revise our practice. Okay, fine, duly noted. But today, as I'm speaking, a payment token is not a security. So AML regulation. Of course, I think you know that anyone who provides payment services or who issues or manages means of payment is deemed to be a financial intermediary. And according to the law, a financial intermediary needs to be affiliated to a self-regulatory organism, a SRO, or to be subject to the direct supervision of the FINMA. This means that anyone issuing a payment token qualifies as a financial intermediary and need to be affiliated to an SRO or be subject to the FINMA supervision. That being said, the FINMA, surprisingly I would say, in the guidelines, make an easement to this requirement. And they say the issuer of a payment token will be compliant with the AML regulation if it accepts the funds via a third party who is affiliated to an SRO or subject to the FINMA supervision. It's quite surprisingly. And in this case, the ICO issuer of the payment token does not need himself to be affiliated to the SRO or be subject to the FINMA supervision. Now, maybe it's important. So no other regulation applies to the payment token, but FINMA made it very clear that exchange of cryptocurrency into fiat or into other cryptocurrency fall under the AML regulation. And this is the same applies to the offering of services to transfer token, if the service provider maintains the private key. So all the custody wallet provider are subject to the AML regulation. Maybe it's a bit too specific. Utility tokens, securities regulation. FINMA says utility token is not a security if their sole purposes is to confer digital rights to an application or service, and if the utility token can actually be used in this way at this point of time. Utility token, on the contrary, may be qualified as a security, and this is the guidelines which say that, if the utility token has an investment purpose, even partially. So you can have a utility token and an investment purpose, both. It will be a security, it will be treated as a security by the FINMA. The question remains, because a lot of ICO who are using utility tokens are launching the token and their platform has not yet been developed. So basically, if you receive the money from the ICO where the platform is not developed, and then you invest the money to develop the platform, will it be qualified as security under the guidelines? So basically, this is not clarified in the guidelines of the FINMA, but on the 21st of March, there is a roundtable session, Q&A session with the FINMA, and we're going to address this question to them, and it will be clarified at this time. But we put it here just to raise awareness on that. If it's a security, then you need a prospectus under the Code of Application. Now, AML regulation for utility token is not subject to AML regulation, provided that the main functionality of the token is the access right to a non-financial application of the blockchain. Meaning that if the utility token main function is an access right to a financial application of the blockchain, it will be subject to the AML regulation. The problem is that basically all utility token has also a mean of payment, because you use the services of a platform of the issuer, right? So the question, if you use the utility token to pay things, services and goods in the platform of the issuer, would it qualify as a hybrid token, a mean of payment, and be subject to the AML? So basically, our point of view is that if the payment function of the utility token is only an accessory function of the utility token, then it should not be subject to the AML regulation. But there is another rule which is even more, I would say, straight to the point. It's the FINMA who said that in its circular 2011 on financial intermediation. It says that the issuance of means of payment is subject to the AML, the Anti-Money Laundering Act, when the issuer is not the same as the user of the mean of payment. That means, okay, in other words, I am an issuer of a utility token, okay? And I can say, you have a token and you can use my services and my goods on my platform. But you can use also this token to acquire goods and services to a platform of third party, then it becomes to be a means of payment. But as long as it's remain in your platform, exclusively in your platform, then it should stick to the definition of a utility token. I hope I made myself clear on that. Okay, so then asset tokens, because I was drawn that I have to be more quick. Of course, asset token, as I said, it's subject to securities law. It is a security. It is qualified as an uncertificated securities to the extent that they are standardized and suitable to mass trading. And you need to have, of course, a prospectus in accordance with the Code of Obligation. And also, the asset token qualifies security if it represents a derivative. So I don't want to go into much detail with that. And for the AML regulation, asset tokens are not subject to AML regulation, but of course, if it's an hybrid token, as I said, it has a means of payment, it will be subject to AML regulation and an affiliation to the SRO. Finally, in a case of pre-financing and pre-sale, the FINMA said that if the token does not exist, but the claim is tradable, it will be a security. So we in our law firm, we're advising a lot of pre-phase of utility token, and the person does not have the token yet issued. So we definitely we provide in the purchase agreement that we specify explicitly that the claim is not tradable to be under the scope of the security. That's important to understand also. So now I will stop my presentation and to see whether all the explanation can be summarized in a chart, and I will let the floor to Alexander. Good luck.
Okay, so again, you have three categories. Okay, assets tokens. In French, jetons d'investissement, which is a bit different than asset tokens, but utility tokens. I will go here and payment tokens. So you will find here the utility payments and here the asset tokens. Then you need to assess what kind of asset token. So we heard our colleague from Swiss Real Coin who mentioned a debt token. That's clear, it's clear cut, it's a bond issuance. Okay, so you will reimburse the amounts and you will give floating or fixed interest. Then you have the equity token. This is a stock or a share in the company with voting rights and right to receive some dividends in case there are some dividends paid. That's the second box. Third one is participation rights, bond jouissance. Those are close to shares, stock in a company, but without any voting rights. Oh, sorry. You have three others categories: mutual fund, which requires an approval from FINMA in case the fund is incorporated in Switzerland, derivative tokens, and hybrid tokens. Okay, the first three boxes here do not require any authorization or approval by FINMA, but you need a prospectus complying with the Swiss regulation. So the advantage of the asset token is it's a clear cut, you know what it is, it's a security. Our colleague from Swiss Real Coin told us, and in Switzerland, we don't need any FINMA authorization to issue a security. So that's for the asset token. Then, for the utility token, one has to bear in mind that in case there is some investment purposes in the utility token, it could be qualified by FINMA as an asset token. So when drafting the purchase agreement, terms and conditions, you need to make sure that you target users, consumers, not investors. So you should avoid the term investors. Those are for asset tokens, not utility tokens. That's our advice. Then the payment token it's easy. Either it's the issuer can be used only on the token issuer platform. It's not a payment token, or it can be used on the third-party application or platform. In this case, it's a payment token. So now the categories are quite clear from FINMA. Of course, you need to make sure, in particular for the utility token, that it is not requalified as an asset token. So that's, again, a broad map of the different kinds of ICOs. As issuer, you need to make sure in which category you fall, and as investor, you should know in which token you invest, because you want to know what you receive. In an investment, you want to know whether you will receive back the nominal, whether you will receive only the proceeds of the company, or whether the assets will be managed. In such a case, it is a fund. So, as issuer and investor, you need to make sure in which category you fall. It's almost exhaustive, I believe, and it is not published yet because we are waiting for the FINMA to answer some of our questions on March 21st. Maybe you can go to the next, Fabien.
Yes. Sorry.
So again, we will go to Impact Hub, I think, on March 21st to ask FINMA some questions about the directive, the guidelines. Then my colleague Fabien will go to Zurich again to work with the blockchain task force. So he's working now with all our colleagues in Zurich to develop a new legislation, a new law applicable to blockchain tokens. And then the FINMA also decided to have its own working group, especially with other authorities, so we know what they propose as a new regulation. But we anticipate the upcoming regulation to be positive, because you know that the Federal Council, Federal Department of Finance, and FINMA they all have communicated positively on the ICOs, so we believe the new regulation will be very positive to the market. So if you have some questions, you can find here our contact information.